and welcome to another episode of the Performance Cafe. I'm so glad to have you here today on our second live stream. Now, for those of you who actually care to be counting or have great issues with attention to detail and notice that I've been gone for a couple of weeks, I've had to deal with a little personal situation. It's called a family emergency, for want of a better word. It gives you the general gist of what I'm talking about. And so for 3 weeks, nigh on 3 weeks, there was just about no work, no productivity, just dealing with hospitals and doctors and who knows what all else. And it's so interesting because this morning I was sitting in bed and I was reading an article where they spoke about the 5 different types of employees who quit during the Great Resignation. Now, I can't remember the reference. Apologies. If anyone's interested, you can ask me and I'll release that as soon as I can find it again. But they spoke of things like some people resigned just because they were so close to resignation or, like retirement and stuff. They were like, just whatever, let me just get out of here. This is too much for me. I'm out of here. There were our Gen Zs and our millennials who went, we want more life purpose. We want more meaning. We want more fulfillment. So if you're not going to give that to us, no, not happening. There are those people who have become gig workers, right? Who have become part of the contingent workforce where people actually just leave a business and actually subcontract back to that same business. I can't remember what the last one was, but the fourth one was the one that really resonated with me given the past 3 weeks that I've had. If I had worked for someone else in the past 3 weeks, I probably would have lost my job. I had to move to another city temporarily. I couldn't work. I couldn't reach out to clients. It was so disruptive. It was almost like I fell off the face of the earth for a couple of weeks. So the kind of employee that resigned during the Great Resignation that related to me the most at this point was actually caregivers, people who had someone at home that they had to take care of, and where things like work-life balance was just so out of whack that they couldn't take care of those individuals the way they wanted to. I suppose the best example, as you would know, would be moms who gave up taking on employment so that they could spend time with children. And as we know, and I think it was the same in most countries, South Africa certainly was not alone in this, we had situations where kids couldn't go to school for weeks on end, if not months. So we were trying to, as a mom, run the house, but you can't actually always go out to do the shopping unless it's sort of once a week. Trying to do homeschool children, which you've never done before, you're learning now. Trying to work from home, which you might not have done before. And in general, just keep the world going without any social contact and without any social support. Now, the past 3 weeks, I have been surrounded by friends, family and loved ones. Without their support, I don't know what I would have done. I stood next to the hospital bed thinking, thank heavens COVID is over, because so many people lost family members when they, couldn't be there with them. And so I was thinking this morning, the humble role of the caregiver, but actually how vital a role it is and how important that social support and interaction is. Being able to pitch up at the hospital, see the doctor and say to him, what now? Where do we go to? And it really just got me back on this whole thing of the Great Resignation. And I was thinking, I know what those caregivers would have felt like during the Great Resignation. And I just went and I refreshed my memory. And I actually said to Jonathan, my godson, I said to him, John, this has been done to death. But I just feel like it needs to be done again because I'm not sure whether employers have actually been listening. And I think the downside to that is that if employers have not been listening, now that we're out of COVID, now that we see more stories about war and floods and stuff like that, and COVID numbers aren't the thing we're checking every day anymore, are they just going to backslide into the companies that they were? Are they going to carry on taking employees for granted? Or are they going to start creating a more satisfactory environment? And by the token of satisfactory environment, I was speaking to another friend of mine last night, JH, and we were talking about the chief experience officer or the employee experience officer. And I said to JH, what I prefer like is the chief success officer for your employees. How do we set them up for success? So given that this is sort of the approach that I take to employees and what I'd like to see for them, I thought this morning, I just wanted to recap some of the points that we've seen, the reasons behind the Great Resignation. And I think that it's so important to, again, I'm not going to tell you anything new, but I think we need to sit and reflect on what that means. So the first thing is a toxic work environment. If I don't like someone in my family, I get away from them. If I don't like my spouse, I divorce them. What makes us think as employers that we are going to keep and hang on to our top talent in a toxic workforce? In fact, I often wonder if employers know that they have a toxic environment. And I'll tell you why. It's kind of interesting, but I'm not sure that all people in organizations actually work in the same organization, even if they work in the same building. There's certain elements that actually just fly past you when you have a good title, when you are higher up in the hierarchy. There are things that you can do autonomously. There are things that you don't have to put up with, that you can put a stop to. But someone who's lower down on the hierarchy, well, they don't have that power. So they cannot actually change their environment significantly. Yes, they can have a positive attitude. They can always try and be proactive about things. There's always something someone can do. But one little light in all the darkness still makes for a lot of darkness. And I'd like to challenge employers today. When last did you do an employee engagement survey? When last did you check the climate of your organization and see how people were feeling about it? And an honest one, done by an external force, so that people realize that when they speak up, they will be heard, and that content won't be edited to suit top management. Next up is a lack of recognition. And this is one I've been battling for years. And that is because actually, like feedback, recognition should be given often. Often when I say this to employers, then they go, what? A lack of recognition, but then we have to give them more money. Actually, money is only one of the things. And you already do that, I'm hoping, through bonuses and incentives. What I'm talking about is really, really recognizing someone. Now, think about the word recognize. When we say recognize, it means that you have a pattern in your mind and you see something that matches that pattern. How many of you as employers know your employees so well that you know more about them than what they do at your office? Because you see, once you recognize someone, once you acknowledge their life beyond the office walls, then what you're doing is you're seeing them as a whole person. Firstly, you're recognizing their humanity. Secondly, you're recognizing the importance of friends, family, and their community to them. Sometimes recognition is not about the money. Sometimes it's not just even about you've done the job well. Sometimes it's about, hey, I heard your son was sick. How's he feeling now? Is he better? Were you guys able to cope? Right? Even that is recognition, because we're asking of recognition of humanity, not just recognition of a job well done, although that is as important. Next up, being underpaid. Now, this is a tough one, right? We've got to ensure the sustainability of the business. So we can't spend money we don't have. But on the other hand, also understand that if employees feel underpaid and hard done by, there's no way they're going to give you the productivity to ensure the sustainability of the organization. When last did you do a real check on what bread costs, on what flour costs, and most recently, what sunflower oil costs? The world is becoming more and more expensive. Recent wars, COVID, inclement weather, it's all had an effect. And even richer people, more financially well-endowed people would be, I suppose, the better word to say, even they are starting to check the price tags on things. Go and check what your workers get paid. And the other question is, if I was to lose that worker, how much money would I not be able to make? Because remember, that's the thing. You don't pay workers just to be there. You pay them to do a job. If they're not there, who's going to do the job? And how will that impact your ability to produce your revenues on your products? And then lastly, the very big one, that there's no work-life balance. Now, I don't actually believe in work-life balance. I think I only need to balance my work and my life when my work doesn't satisfy me. And when my work absolutely takes over my entire life the whole time. So what am I meaning? I prefer to think of it as life integration. I have, and you have, a life. And there's a lot of stuff in that life. I've got 2 dogs that are a major component. They keep me busy enough. I have elderly parents, family, friends, community. I've got hobbies. I've got the business. Please note that the business is one of 7 things in my life. Why is it then, as employees, we make as if it's the only thing? Sorry, as employers. My apologies. So why do we as employers make it the only thing? It can only be the only thing if it is so enticing that it's okay for the employee for it to be the only thing, if they want it to be the only thing. Now, it'll never be the only thing, but we know that sometimes there are peaks and valleys, and sometimes we have to work hard and sometimes we can go a bit slower. But then leave over and give autonomy to your employees to manage that, right? When we're checking bums on seats and timesheets, then we're forcing people to be in a space where they don't need to be, doing something they don't need to do at a particular time. Where if we know, well, when overtime needs to be worked, they're going to do their work in anyway, then maybe it's okay that they take a lunch and go to the doctor, maybe take a couple of hours off one day, off the books, to do what they need to do. Because at that point in time, work is not that one thing. There's something else. And by giving them that space, they'll then have the freedom to make work that one thing when you need it most. I hope this has added some level of depth to what we've been seeing for months on end. I'm going to see if we've got comments today. And we've got a question here. And the question here says, how do employees work against the trends that I've just discussed in organizations? So that's a really interesting question. I think that, at the risk of using a rather poor example, I'd normally say you're going to battle. As a single employee, you're going to battle. But for any of you who are in South Africa and know about our toll booths that were put up in Gauteng, people just refused to pay for using roads that they were already being taxed for. And if a single individual had stood up and said, this is enough, then it wouldn't have worked. But because so many people, I think right now only 17% of users are actually paying those bills, they're going to have to scrap that toll gate system now, because it's taking them more money to chase people to get the money than what it is actually bringing in. So it's just not financially viable anymore. So on the one hand, as a single employee, talking to a boss, talking to a team leader, but as a couple of you, well, maybe there's something more that you could do there. Maybe you could design a team charter and take that to a manager or to a team leader. Also, the interesting thing is, remember that if you work in a toxic environment, it's one thing, but can you maybe change that environment within the team and make sure that the team is fine? Can you give that recognition within your team to other people by saying, gee, thanks for helping me, or I saw you do that, or whatever the case may be? And how's about as a team pulling together to create a bit of work-life balance, saying, oh, I've got to stay later, let me do that for you so you can go early, and then it gets repaid at another point. So I think as a little team or a little functional unit, maybe there is something that you can do there. I'd be interested to see how that turns out. Right, so I think that is it for today. And thank you so much for yet again visiting with me at the Performance Cafe. Thank you for joining this live session. And please feel free to add any comments below or any questions, or you can DM me on LinkedIn as well. But until next time, I look forward to seeing you at the Performance Cafe.